If there's one sound that will rearrange everything you think you know about safety, it's a knock at the door in the middle of the night. Not hurried, not polite, a slow, measured knock that feels like a question asked by something that already knows the answer. It was a Thursday. Work had been a grind, small mistakes, and more coffee than pride. I shut the laptop, washed my face, and decided to watch one episode before sleep claimed me. The apartment was quiet in the way buildings are when everyone else in them has surrendered to dreams. The street light outside hummed like someone running an old engine. I sat on the couch, blanket half-wrapped, screen glow painting the room in soft blue. Then came the knock. 3 soft thuds, deliberate and spaced, exactly like a metronome. Knock. 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 The hallway door rocketed into a place in my body I didn't know existed and made my breath go short. At first I thought it was a late neighbor, a delivery gone wrong, some ordinary disruption. Then my phone buzzed on the coffee table, a text from an unknown number. "I know you're awake." The words were not a taunt. They were a map. Everything in the room seemed to align to the sound of them. The curtains were closed. The peephole was there, a small, smug eye on my world. I moved to it with the ridiculous, impossible calm you only have when you know your life has just been tilted. There was a silhouette at the door. No face. Just a dark shape, shoulders as if wrapped in a hood. For a heartbeat I thought of leaving it, of letting the voice play itself out like a bad recording. Instead, I clicked the chain on the inside and dialed 911, whispering like it would make the operator less likely to hang up on me. Words into the call, the line died. The phone showed bars, but nothing moved, no connected tone, no distant calm voice telling me help is on the way. I tried again. Still nothing. My eyes darted to the window, to signals, to the one bar that had been my late-night lifeline for years. It flickered and went dead. When a person who meant you harm knows how to cut a lifeline before you grow certain you need it, they make terror surgical. Another knock. Closer this time. Knock. 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 The silence after it felt like a held breath. I could have opened the door. I could have spoken. That first panic thought, do something, anything, is the animal half of your brain. But something else, memory, training, 1,000 little late-night videos that plant paranoid seeds, kept me silent. I pulled the curtains back a fraction and looked through the sliver, breath fogging the glass. The silhouette stepped away, a figure moved down the hallway like a river taking its time. A message popped up on my phone. Let me in. This was no longer a mistake. This was a script being read to me and only me, a performance crafted to elicit action. Whoever was at the door wanted me to open it. Every cliché about being careful rushed up, do not open. But life is not a satire of caution. People you love call, small emergencies happen. I thought about my neighbor's cat locked outside last winter, the time the pipes froze. I pictured myself as the person who would have needed someone to knock that night, and my stomach turned. Then a second knock, from the back. A quiet, hollow thud at the sliding door that leads to the tiny balcony. The apartment tightened around me like a fist. It took me 3 seconds to realize why the knocks were staged. Front, lure. Back, confirmation. One sound keeps your attention, the other manages the rest. My head flooded with images that weren't useful. Someone lifted in the crawlspace, a locksmith who took night calls, a courier with a smile who knows how to look like daylight. I shoved my phone under my pillow and moved through the apartment like a shadow. I checked the kitchen, cabinets, the closet that hides gifts you never open. Nothing obvious. The noise inside was louder than the knocking now, my heart, my breathing, the small scrape of the heater cycling on. I whispered to myself the rules I'd learned reading stories: stay quiet, stay hidden, make yourself small. Somewhere outside, and I don't know how much later, time metered differently that night, the texter tried a different play. Open for your cat, the phone said. I laughed then, a sound that wanted to be braver. I tried calling the neighbor across the hall, the only person I trusted by doorstep proximity. No answer. I sent a message I hoped would be simple and neighborly: "Are you home?" 2 minutes later, a reply: "Who is at your door?" But it came from a different number, the exact same unknown digits. This was no random prank, now it was mimicry. Panic reasserted itself, but panic is a blunt instrument. I needed clarity. I turned the living room lamp off and crept to the hall. That's when I saw boot prints on the mat, faint, muddy half-moons that hadn't been there at dusk. They stopped at the slider and then continued as if someone had changed their gait. I realized, horrifying, that I had been focused on the wrong threshold. The back slider was latched but not bolted. The chain on the front would have bought me seconds, not security. The world had 1,000 small safeties. Intruders use the ones that people habitually skip. I did not describe this for the same reason you do not say a spell aloud in a library. I was not trained to teach someone else how to break in. I remember the shape of fear, not the tools. I moved to the bedroom and crawled under the bed. The void under there is a shape designed for hiding, thin, dark, and smelling faintly of dust and old socks. I pressed my back to the floorboards and listened. The door handle to the bedroom clicked. Slow. Deliberate. Someone testing whether intruders make noise or whether the house is an accomplice in silence. The footsteps moved lighter, pausing at the threshold. The person called my name, my full name, soft as an apology. My jaw clenched so hard I tasted pennies. "You don't have to do this," a voice said, not at the door but on the phone, the same unknown number making it sound as if the speaker were inside my living room. The words were casual, as if ordering coffee. "Open up. We can handle this quietly." I bit the inside of my cheek until it bled. Shame is a quick partner in terror, shame for being caught, shame for hiding, shame that the life you thought ordinary had been noted, logged, and used against you. Minutes bled like hours. The knock subsided. There was nothing but the small, torturous sounds of patience, cloth dragged, the faint clink of metal, the distant ticking of my oven lost in the background. I listened to the rhythm. I learned to tell when footsteps crossed the living room versus the hall. I learned the cadence of my own house's complaint. Something small and human shifted the scene. A car door slammed outside, loud, bright, ordinary. The intruder grumbled, the texture of annoyance like any annoyed man in the world. A voice said urgently, "Now," and then a new motion under my floor like someone taking hold of a plan and running. They searched the living room systematically, behind couches, under tables, the space behind the entertainment center that I had always thought was too obvious. Then the soft hiss of breath through a mouthpiece and, worst of all, the rumble of a radio tuned low to a police scanner. Above it, a human voice, respectful, patient, bored. I made a mistake then. A small, human error. My phone, under the pillow to preserve battery, vibrated with one new message. I silenced it with a thumb. The motion was louder than silence and like oil it slid under the door, a thin whisper of noise that didn't belong to the night. A sound. A click. The bedroom door eased open. A presence lowered into the darkness near the foot of the bed. Quiet, efficient. Someone who had spent their hours not making noise but avoiding it. He, because it was a man, crouched and his breath brushed my ankle. For one terrible second I pictured my parents, my job, my unremarkable life stacked into one small vulnerable pile. The man touched the back of my shoe as if checking for an ID, then traced the floor toward the closet. He paused, listened. He chuckled in a way that was shockingly tender, the laugh of someone who knows the joke will be on you. "You should get up," he whispered in that close voice. "You can come out. We don't want to hurt you." I remember the smell, tobacco, cheap cologne, the stale scent of the city. I remember not the shape of his face but the sound of his breathing. I remember thinking, if I live, I will never be the same. Then, like a blade returning to its sheath, he stood. The sound of his boots on hardwood left a memory in my bones, a report for later nights. He moved toward the living room, and the radio clicked off. The apartment became small again, a cellar of patience. At some point in that night the front door opened. I don't remember the moment, memory compresses trauma into punctuation marks. I remember morning as a bright, shallow thing, police, questions, neighbors clustered in pajamas, the tape fluttering like an exhausted flag. I remember the officer's face reading me like a book someone had tried to close too fast. They found evidence. A cigarette stub. A pair of gloves, water-stained, left in the flower bed. But the most dangerous discovery was a small camera, lens smeared, tucked behind the sofa facing the bed. The device had been recording. Not just images, audio, radio waves, the low hum that had become my particular lullaby. The files, when the detective brought them to me, were short clips stitched together, me sleeping on the couch, me laughing at a joke, me answering a call, me opening the freezer. Someone had curated the ordinary moments of my life into a library. They told me later that they thought it was an attempted burglary that had escalated into surveillance. The neighbors said a van had idled 3 blocks over, lights off, for most of the night. The police took the camera and the glove and the boot prints and offered gentle, bureaucratic sympathy. I learned things I wish I hadn't. Knocks are often the easiest tool for a person who wants you to be the architect of your own ruin. They study behavior, routines, lonely hours, the cadence of your life, and they pick the sound that will move you. They practice patience because most of us will gift them seconds by doing exactly what rings are designed to convince us to do: open, answer, trust. But there's another lesson I carried, louder than fear: the most dangerous invasions are the ones that make you feel like an accident. The intruders I would later learn about online, the people who camp out for weeks on porches, who test locks like musicians testing strings, were not monsters in masks. They were humans who want to be unseen and who practice the art of being normal until it stops being safe. That night, the thing that saved me was not cleverness or luck. It was the fact that when the door knocked, I remembered a line from a movie: "If you're not sure, don't open." I remembered to breathe. I remembered that the voice on the other side could make 1,000 reasonable lies sound like a plea. I remembered to make myself small. When the police finally left with paperwork and promises and the sun tried to be ordinary again, I sat at the kitchen table with the mug going cold and felt a new fact settle into my chest. There are hours when the world becomes a study of you, and there's no remedy for being observed except changing the way you move through the day. A week later, the detective gave me a small, white envelope with photocopies inside, images from the camera, a grainy face caught in the half-light, details the human I had not trusted to keep. I stared until the edges blurred. I wanted a villain with a name. I wanted a closure the police could hand me in neat, stamped boxes. Instead I got a number, a line: "We've identified him as part of a group that targets lone households. They move on pattern and patience." Then a phone number I could call for victim assistance. I don't sleep the same anymore. I close the deadbolt twice, and I keep the chain on, and I only open the door after voice verification that feels like an accordion of safety. I moved the camera to face the door. I learned to let calls go to voicemail at 2:17 a.m. Because sometimes the safest thing you can do is not be the puzzle someone else wants to solve. If you take one thing from my story, make it this: a knock can be a kindness, or it can be a calibration. It all depends on who's standing outside wanting the world to read them right. That night changed how I gauge my days. It taught me that ordinary sounds can carry extraordinary intention. It taught me the hard lesson everyone learns too late: you do not owe the night your curiosity. And the last thing I learned, one I still carry like a scar, is this: the worst part of being targeted wasn't the fear itself. It was the knowledge that someone had spent hours turning my life into a file. That someone had sat back and scored my comforts like a ledger. That knowledge is quieter, more intimate, and harder to unlearn than any scream. So when a knock comes at an hour when the world usually sleeps, don't be polite for strangers. Be careful. Be wary. Let the knock be someone else's problem until you have the proof the night demands. Because sometimes survival is measured in the small arithmetic of delays: a locked chain, a message ignored, a phone call that never connects. Sometimes a life is saved not by a hero at the door but by the quietness of someone who decides they won't be convenient tonight.